Welcome to the One-on-One Podcast with your host, Juan Ayala.
Back to another episode of the One-on-One Podcast. I'm your host. As always, make sure to follow the show on social media at the One-on-One Podcast. Also, call in, leave a voicemail, 407-476-4606. Play them on the show. And make sure to check out the website, tjojp.com. For those that want more of the show, patreon.com/the One-on-One Podcast. YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, all that stuff. You know where to find me. Links down in the description. And today we have Heidi Love from the Unfiltered Rise podcast. Welcome, Heidi. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. I'm happy to be here and excited to be on the show and talk to you guys about Mormonism today.
Yay. Yeah, I've never talked about Mormonism. And it's like I was telling you, you caught me at a good time because I was learning about it. I think his name is Mark Hoffman, the famous forger that was selling stuff to the church, and that was on the RX Picture Show. SB, shout out to SB, and they mostly focus on Mark Hoffman, which was a really, really interesting story. But then they kind of still covered Mormonism a little bit. But before we start diving in, Heidi, where can people find you? And what's your podcast all about? Can you tell the people? And I'll post the links in the description as well.
Absolutely. I'm the Unfiltered Rise podcast. We are everywhere podcasts are served. I kind of fell into podcasting. Actually, if you know Josh Monday, he is the reason I am a podcaster. I sent him a little voice memo on Spotify. I love his show. And I said, hey, there's some weird stuff going on at this school. Check it out. It's kind of crazy, esoteric stuff. Thought you might be interested. Okay, bye. And then he's like, no. You have to do it because I'm not a Mormon and I don't understand what all this is. So, will you come on the show? And I'm like, what? I was the most normal of normies. I had gotten out of Mormonism and I was after 2020, I guess I wasn't a normie anymore, but I definitely was like, I don't have anything to do that. I had my son's puzzle light and my phone and I was like podcasting with it, and he had to talk me into it kind of because I was scared. And he's like, no, you're doing fine. It's fine. And then we did 3 more shows together. And then after that, he's like, you might just want to think about doing this because people liked your shows. So I was shocked because I'm just a nurse and a mom. And I was like, why would anybody want to listen to me? But everybody has a story. You never know. Because here where I live in Utah, this is really normal stuff. This is like, oh yeah, everybody knows a lot of this, not the occult parts, but the normal, typical LDS Mormon family knows the other things that I talk about, and they're like, oh, big deal. And so it's kind of like, for me, I didn't realize there was an audience for that, and there definitely is. So I started it, and I'm many interviews down the road now. I think I've done like maybe 40 since May. So it's been a quick ride, but I love it. And it's something that I mainly do to help people. I really felt deceived as a Mormon, and I am not one of those people that believe that everyone should be Christian. I really don't care what you want to do. I feel like that's fine. That's your path. I can give you information. I can show you things. I can maybe help you out. But to be lied to and told something's about Christianity when it's about Freemasonry is wrong. And that really ticked me off. So
yeah,
nothing against Freemasons. Yeah. They can do their thing.
Anyone. And that's part of being a part of this beautiful country, even though the people sometimes in power aren't the most beautiful, but we have, right, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, that we can do what we want, obviously within the constraints of the law, whatever that is. But I always tell people the same thing. It's like, people think that because you talk about certain things on an episode or something that you 100% believe it's like, no, I'm here to have an interesting conversation and learn, right? And so people,
yes,
again, it's all confirmation bias, and it's all upgrade. There's so many things that are going on in someone's head. And sometimes I even think about, how do people truly know? And this is something that I've been for a large part of my life wondering, how is it that people can distinguish between God talking to them and some entity. Like, you don't know if, you know what I mean? It's like, no, you just know. It's like, that source, trust me, bro. Like, that's the whole meme. It's like, source, like, no, you just kind of know. Okay, I can sort of see that you can read an energy or an aura, but I've always wondered what makes this religion the correct one. And I consider myself a Christian, a Pentecostal at that, but there's still 44,000 different denominations of Christianity over essentially the same concept, right? The core concept. How are you able? And I mean, you are able to decipher things various ways, but how is there 44,000 different interpretations of
right.
you know, like that blows my mind. So how, I always wondered as a kid going to church, it's like, people that have never even heard the word Jesus Christ, how is it okay for them to go to hell because they never met, they never understood the concept? Yeah. And I always said, well, if I'm going to hell in their religion, they're going to hell in mine. How does that even work as a kid? Like as a young boy, as a young man. And it's like, I've always wondered why religion and how things are the way they are, like the way that you're able to, and I want you to talk about how someone is, and I want to be as respectful as possible, because it's like, I don't want to say how does somebody fall for it, but how does somebody get involved in something that people look at as a cult? Like, look at Scientology. Scientology is a cult, and people stand outside of their organizations and yell at them like, hey, you're part of a cult, but yet they have like these blinders on. How was it for you? And I know, again, family stuff, usually the family, you're born into it, but how does someone get dragged into this sort of thing?
Oh, yeah. And for me, my story is typical for Utah, but not typical for other people. And that's what we were talking about kind of before. And also, you don't have to worry about respectful for me. I'm very, so part of the reason why I think I fell into podcasting easily is I lettered in debate. And I've always been this more open-minded, even as a Mormon, which I think helped me exit a little bit better, because most Mormons that leave become atheists, and they become very angry and very upset. And I get it. Like, I totally was pissed. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, it was not okay. But at the same time, I always had more of an open mind. Like you, as a child, I was always like, hey, there's racism in the church. Like, doesn't God love everyone? Like, doesn't God love us all the same? Don't we not have a color when we die? Like Mother Teresa. Now, don't crucify me on Catholic stuff, like, because I know some things now that I didn't know then, but I always thought, okay, this lady has devoted her whole life like to this cause and her religion. And we, as Mormons, and I do still accidentally say we a lot. So I am not a Mormon, nor do I want to be one. That will happen a lot with me. I was one for 34 years. So it just happens. But I always would tell my grandma, like, do you really think that this lady that's spent her whole life just helping people is going to go to hell because she believes different than us? Do you really think people that, live in the Amazon that, like you said, never had a chance? What happens with these people? I was very much that human as well. And I think the inquisitive minds buck the structure so hard sometimes that they always go back to the same thing. In Mormonism, they'll work it out when you die. And I hated that answer, because I was like, wait, but that means I don't know anything right now. Like, well, it makes you so unsure of what you're doing and why you're doing it, because it's all gravy until you go through the temple. And once you go through the temple, which we'll get into, and I want to say up front, if you're listening to this and you're a Mormon and you're offended because I speak about your sacred rituals, I'm sorry, but I don't do what most of the podcasters do and say, we're not going to talk about that because it's special to them and sacred. No, there's deception there. There's lies there. When you keep lies in the dark, all it does is make me feel more upset, like kind of abuse victims that are like, well, just don't worry about it anymore and move on with your life. No, I'm not going to do that, because there's things within it that are untrue. Like they're the way they process it and put together Freemasonry into it. It isn't about Christianity. It wasn't about going to heaven. It wasn't about any of this. And guess what? I don't care if people want to be a Freemason. I'm completely opposite of anybody else that's a Christian. If you want to do whatever you want to do, that's great for you. But I think honesty has to be a part of what is happening, or else you're leading blindly, which is why I was in a cult. And so it's like your parents do it. My parents weren't very
It's the
into
blind
it. My
leading the
grandma,
blind, essentially, is what it is.
yeah. Yeah. It's like, it's literally like, you know how they spoke about in Nexium, like the women would tattoo each other, or like in Somalia, the women are the ones that castrate the younger girls. You know, these are like the things that they do that they've had done to them. Therefore, they pass it on because, and you would think, no, wait, they've had this. They know how horrible and painful this was, but they're the ones doing it. They're not, they're the ones committing the crime against the person. However, it's because it's so ingrained in their whole everything of their life, which is Mormonism in general. And if you live in Utah, that is to the umpteenth top degree, because we are encased in it. It runs this whole state. It runs our politics. It runs our schools. It runs our news. It runs everything. There is no separation of church and state here. And everyone makes you feel like, you know, it's a big club and you're not in it. Well, I was in it and I got out. And now that is not acceptable to everyone. And that is difficult to stay here. But I have family here. My kids are rooted here. They're going to have grandkids soon. I can't just cut loose and move away. So the only other thing I can do is speak my truth. And if they disagree, I'm sorry, but you know, I'm not going to keep your special covenants anymore. It's part of me saying that's enough for me.
So you were born into the religion then?
Yes. So I had a different upbringing than most Mormons. My mom was a hippie. My name is Heidi Love. Like that is my real, that's like not a cute thing. That's like my name. So that's my middle name. My parents were extreme hippies and they were a little different, but they came from, my mom anyway, came from a very religious upbringing with her mom, and my great grandparents on that side and great and great, they all settled this area on my DNA ancestry.com because I was dumb and didn't know not to do that test back in the day. Like, yeah, probably there's one of me in China somewhere. Like,
There's
good
a
luck with my
homunculus
back.
of you, yeah, 100%.
Yes, for sure. And good, like I said, I have enough genetic problems. Good luck with that. But it literally says in my DNA profile, Mormon settler. And so they know these things. And it's very odd to me that they do know these things, like, because the Mormon church actually pours into that by a different website, which is familysearch.org. People get it confused and say, oh, well, the Mormon church owns ancestry.com. And the way they get around that, same thing like Mark Hoffman, I did a big episode on him. The way they get around these things is they don't own it, but somebody they're affiliated with does. And then they can say, oh, we didn't know. Same thing with the Hoffman letters. The person that bought it was not the church, it was a wealthy bishop that they said donated it to them. So it's like these little sneaky ways around it. And I'll tell you, they're a very smart church. They're a very up to date. They stay up to date on what the agendas are. They're very involved. They're very rich. They are not stupid. They didn't get rich for nothing. So we're not talking about bumpkins on the side of a weird road somewhere, like when you say cult, we're not a hippie compound. Not that. I'm not dogging that either. Whatever you want to do, go do that. But like, this is very mainstream here. And we're not the fundies. The fundamentalists are a whole nother, we can go into that. But I have such a strange life. That's another part of the reason why I do this, because like even the fundamentalist part, I had a show 2 weeks ago because my ex-brother-in-law is Warren Jeff's like nephew and like another way related.
And
because
who's
they
Warren Jeff?
intermarry.
Is that like the top guy or something?
He's the fundamentalist top guy that got arrested for and it was really bad for being intimate with like 12-year-olds. So
because you're making it, and again, I'm in Florida, so
it's wild.
It's a different.
Yeah.
You're making it seem like these people. How big is Mormonism? Because I would have never thought that it's like this culture-driven thing in Utah. But it's weird because it seems like Utah is a weird place. Is there something in the ground that's going on? You got Skinwalker Ranch and everything there. It's like, what's going on in Utah?
We could talk about, like I said, I wanted you back on because not only Utah, but Mormonism is weird in general. I feel like it was, so I'll get into this when we get into the slides, but I do feel like it was divinely given to someone, but not by a good angel. I feel like we're going to go right down the John D. angels. And as you know, they weren't very kind to him in the end. And we'll get into all that. But I do think that there is a very big stronghold on the Mormon church. And I think it goes specifically back to Abraxas. They talk about Abrax, and we'll get into that. But there's some forces at work there that if you do not believe in esoteric things, you'll never get. There's definitely weird strongholds that go on within that church that they'll never speak about. But here in my neighborhood, I am probably the only one that isn't LDS for blocks. I'm definitely one of the only apostates, which means I left and I renounce all of it, knowing what I know in this complete area. If you have kids and they go to play with the neighbors and you're not a Mormon, they won't let your kids play with their kids. Like, this is a community full. And when I say there's a church on every corner, I mean, sometimes those churches are separated by a block. We are saturated. This is a mainstream thing here. And this is a very hard thing to do when you leave, but not only leave and become an apostate and speak out. My husband left when he was 16 and he never went through all this stuff. He just kind of got out, but he didn't go through he didn't have all the knowledge. I had all the knowledge. Therefore, this is a quote from church. This is their church dogma, is the only place, the outer darkness, which is their hell. People go there for murder and apostasy. And that's me. They considered me completely tainted, and I lost most of my family and everything when I got out.
So I looked up here how many people does Mormonism have. It's reported at 17 million. Now, that's not a lot compared to Christianity or say Islam, which has billions of people, but it's still a lot of people. That's still 17 million is not a figure, right? At the end of 2022, the Latter-day Saints Church had 31,330 congregations and a reported membership of 17,002,461. So that's as of 2022.
I would be curious what what it is in specifically Utah and versus our population. Cause I bet you it's probably, I would guess 70% if it was a guess, just a cold guess. But, so my mom,
the concept of, right, so you have this whole lineage thing, which I can see where that could go wrong, right? Because I was born in Christianity, you want the same values for your kids. You've known nothing else, so you pass it on to your kids. They're programmed, it passes it on to their, so it's this generational cycle. And then when you try and break that, you are the black sheep essentially. And yeah, this is really this. I know this is a lot. Are we in any danger at all by talking about this? Am I going to get emails about this?
You won't probably. I always get people that are really worried about the Mormon Church has a lot of power here. People joke, but not joke about what they can do to people here. But the thing is they already have my number. Like, they have the door knockers that still try with me, and I really don't care anymore. So, whatever they're going to do, and they're careful now. They used to be a lot more scary and would send their own people out. They had the Danites, which were like an army to go out after people, but that was a long time ago. At this point, I just don't care. And I've made multiple videos and got dinged for it, saying I would never unalive myself.
Yeah.
Because I just want people to know that. Yep. And so, with me, like I said, with my family, it was kind of a weird dichotomy too, because my mom and my dad were really wild, and my mom didn't live the church. So they sent us with our neighbors that were very active, and she knew that it was like, oh, this is a good thing for you. My grandma had 4 kids and none of them went through, and they were wild. They were bikers. And they were just wild kids that kind of went against it. And my grandpa was kind of the head of that. He was a 1%er. I don't know if you know what that is, but he was a biker. Like, it was bad. And then my uncle was a sundowner and all these different things. And so you have to remember, like, I'm seeing this from little child eyes, and my dad ended up in prison by the time I was 8. And so all the people in my life that weren't in the church were just not what I wanted to aspire to be. And then I had this grandma that was good, and she took care of me. And I actually ended up being a ward of the court by the time I was 12. And that was when more of my religion became onto me, because I lived with her. And so it was kind of like, oh, this lady has it together. She seems to know everything that's going on. Like, look at their life, look at her life versus these other people in my life, like going to prison and all this stuff. So yeah, I was like the one person. She kind of counted me as the 5th kid. And she's like, you have to make it. You're none of the other kids are ever going to do it. So it was a ton of pressure on me. Like, okay, I'm going to make it, I guess, and so you go through, and in high school, like, all of it is indoctrinated. Like, they have seminary. So all the years I was in high school from 9th grade to 12th grade, I took seminary for a full class period and learning only about Mormon religion, seminary. All the kids do this.
In the U.S.?
In Utah. It is offered anywhere that Mormon churches have school, but this is in a public school, not a private school.
What in the
They
world?
offer this. Yeah, this gets wild because you can't date. Like, if people say, oh, you meet a boy and you think he's cute and he like, are you Mormon? And you're like, no, then they're not probably going to date you if they're Mormon. So, because they really ingrain it, like, don't date anyone you wouldn't marry. You'll never change somebody. And that became a huge problem for me, because I fell in love with a Roman Catholic Irish guy. He was even a Mick, like a Mick Daniel, Mick Henry. And I was like, oh my gosh. And they said, oh, you'll never change him. You should not stay with him. You shouldn't marry him. And I mean, actually, I shouldn't have married him because I was 17, but he was 25.
That's another podcast. That's another story.
Whole nother show. But when they found out all of that he was like Roman Catholic, and I'm like, oh, he's going to convert. And they're like, yeah, he never will. And so they just push it on you. And so, all your friends are Mormon. All the people you hang out with are Mormon, even though they might be doing stuff that they shouldn't be. Like, maybe they act perfect on Sunday and then they're out drinking last Saturday.
That's everyone.
Like,
that's even Christians do that.
And exactly. Yeah. It's anybody. So it's really actually more, I feel like it's more ingrained in Mormons to lie. And from a very early age, you realize some things like, oh, you're going to have to go have a mission, like a whole meeting with this bishop about what you've been doing. Are you morally clean? Are you doing what you need to be doing? And like they straight up ask you, like, do you masturbate? You're like 13 and with the man, this bishop, all by yourself.
They get off on
and
it too.
Like the first time. Absolutely. And now I'm older and you know better, but like at the time you think this is about your salvation. So you're like, oh, okay, I got to tell the 100% truth. Well, when you find out, that's horrifically embarrassing because they don't just say, okay, yeah, okay, you did that. No, they want details. It goes into like really weird stuff. So by the third or second time you go in there, you're like, nope, I never do anything wrong. I'm perfect in every way. I don't, because then they call your parents in if it's like really intense things like maybe drinking or whatever, not necessarily sexual, but it just got to the point where I was like, yeah, I'm not telling anything anymore, and I wasn't the only one.
And that's right. Cause I have a 5-year-old, he's going to be 6, and you realize when they learn, right. So to talk about lying and the concept of lying, or twisting the truth. That's such right. When as a kid, he realized he can lie and get away with it. It's almost like to them, it's like a superpower when they first figure it out, but they don't know. They're not good at it. So you can tell when they're lying to you, and you're like, "Yo, tell me the truth." So yeah, and so you're in this as a young girl. Your grandma pushed you into it. You saw that they were perfect, and then they kind of had structure because of the religion. Nobody else in your family was in it. Now, they
were in it, but they were Jack Mormons. We call Jack Mormons like your people that go, like the Catholics that go on Easter and Christmas. They were that
twice a year.
They still, they believe in it, but they want to drink and smoke, and you can't do that stuff. So. They were just like, oh, okay. But I still believe like they're sometimes harder now that I'm out. They are sometimes worse to speak to. A Jack Mormon will fight you to the death because I feel like this is my own thoughts on it, but I feel like it's because they don't live it that they need to actually really defend it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because then they're like, oh, but you don't know this or that. And I'm like, this is crazy. You don't even go. I mean, like, why do you care about this? But I mean, it is what it is. You can't change it. And so everything you're growing up, you don't just go to church on Sundays. You're going to your class every day for seminary. Then you go to Young Women's once a week, which is like the teenage program. So you're going to that and you go, sometimes as combined with the men. So you're doing activities together and it's fun. Because they're like, oh, we'll go do this and then we'll go have ice cream, or we'll go do this and we'll have some fun thing. And they, so that happens once a week. And then on top of it, you've got everybody that expects certain things of you. And then on top of that, you've got church for 3 hours on Sunday. So you're busy all the time. And then when you become an adult, it's even more. You have to do. So there's the same meetings for men and women. Then there's something called visiting teaching meetings, and you have to do that once a month and go talk to your neighbors and see how they're doing. And then you have 3-hour church on Sunday. And then you have the kids meetings, which are almost different every day, depending on the age bracket. So if they're little, it's primary. If it's young men, the young men's go on a different day as the primary. So the Mormon moms are just like running all the time. And then everything is like sports related to, oh, they have a basketball, they have this, they have that. So you're just always doing something with the church. And then you have to, go in, and if somebody has surgery, you got to go help bake a casserole and go do service. And, it's just and I'm not saying any of that's bad, really. I mean, it isn't, but it's a lot.
Yeah.
When you have to live a normal life.
And this is the thing about religion, though. In religion itself, so it gives you, not only does it give you a structure, it gives you values. And later on, I want you to tell me the good things about Mormonism, right? Because we always focus on the negative, but I want you to tell me the good things. And in a nutshell, because I have looked at Mormonism very superficial. I know that Joseph Smith was messing around with Enochian. There was some necromancy involved, all that stuff. But Can you explain it to me like I'm 5 years old? What is the essentials of the belief system of Mormonism? For those that are not familiar with it, what is
Sure.
essentially what they believe?
So they believe that Joseph Smith was a prophet that got, so when he was 14, this is the story of the first account. However, just so people are aware, there are 5 stories of the first account, but the Mormon church has made it into this one. And there's been many changes along the way, which they'll deny, but it's truth. And so he says that he didn't know which church to join. There was Reformation going on at that point. There was a lot of things happening with religion. And so all these churches surrounded him and he didn't know which one to join. So he decided, in the Bible, it said, let you ask of God and he'll tell you. So he went out and prayed in the woods. This is their story. And God, the Father and the Son appeared to him and told him, don't join any of them because you're going to make your own church. And then he had many apparitions come to him after that, different angels. It gets into the plates. Moroni, the angel, showed him the plates of the Book of Mormon that were buried in his backyard, which is hilarious. But he had to go find them. This is their story, and translate them into the Book of Mormon. And they actually discount the Bible a lot. They say, if anything doesn't correlate, they say, well, the Bible's only correct in as much as it's translated. So they use it, but they only use it, they cherry pick it hard.
New Testament, so they or Old Testament?
Both. They do the King James version, but they have a lot of verses that don't correlate. So they'll say there's footnotes at the bottom, and if it doesn't correlate, it'll lead you back to the Book of Mormon. And so that they will throw out the Bible before the Book of Mormon. And they believe this is truth. They believe he translated it from these golden plates, and that he was just this innocent, sweet young kid that had never done, anything wrong, had no reason to not believe him, which we'll get into. But he writes the book, it gets published out, and it goes from there. So that is what they believe. They also believe in multiple heavens. They believe that God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are not one. They do not believe in the Trinity. They believe there are 3 separate entities. And they believe that Jesus was created, that God, the Father, actually had sex with Mary, that wasn't divine, that he's a man just like we're a man, and that he was created. Yes, he's godly, but he was literally created as all, they said it nicely, as all men are created. But they discount a lot of things that way. I would say they spend a lot of time deifying Joseph Smith, and it doesn't help that he was martyred. So it becomes a whole situation.
And this is early 19th century. So we have the 1820s around there is when this dude is coming up with this stuff, right? So it's not like it was a very long time ago. It was fairly recent, and I can imagine him asking God for guidance and then pulling a L. Ron Hubbard, like, I can just make my own thing and make all the money myself, and that's it. And I could just tell people that it's divinely inspired. That's really interesting. So this guy,
and the backstory on it, and we can go to slides at any time because the different backstories are gonna let's go, because I think that it might help, like with me telling about like what is going on here. So let me get to this. So the first thing that I think a lot of people don't focus on is the fact that, can you see some writing on the screen there?
Yeah. Just want to remind everyone, make sure to check out the show on Patreon, patreon.com/the One-on-One Podcast. I constantly get emails. Oh, only 1 episode a week. Yeah, 1 episode a week for the public, but for as little as $5 a month, you can get up to 2, sometimes 3, sometimes 1 episode per day on the Patreon, as well as on the YouTube channel as a member for as little as $5. And there's also on the Patreon over 250 episodes only found on there. There's an extensive backlog of episodes. So check that out for those interested, for those asking. Make sure to follow the show on YouTube, Juan Juan Podcast. Also, Juan Juan Media. I am going live every Tuesday on there streaming. I also go live on twitch.tv/Juan on Juan Podcast. So make sure to check me out on there Tuesdays, 6 p.m. Eastern. And make sure to get your copy of the Occultus Mundi Homunculus Owner's Manual, all that good stuff at tjojp.com. Can pick up your copies there or go over to the Ko-Fi. I'm on Facebook, Twitch, Kick, Rumble, all that good stuff. You know where to find it. And enjoy this episode.
Or that other one. Okay, so this is his mother. And this is Joseph Smith's mom. She wrote a biography, Lucy Mack Smith, and she tried to get that out, and it was written and published and everything. And later, the second prophet of the church tried to have this annihilated and burned because it doesn't look well. In this, it talks about, it says, let my reader not suppose that because I shall pursue another topic for a season that we stopped our labor and went at trying to win the faculty of a brack. And my screen share little thumbnails are right there. So let's see.
Yeah, it's covering it.
So basically she says right here, okay, they have labored, still drawing magic circles, all these things, and that they didn't stop doing that. They were a well-known family of treasure hunters and treasure diggers. They used Joseph Smith as a scryer, and she is Scottish. And so when we speak of the House of Abrac, it's where abracadabra came from. It's Abraxas, which is this chicken snake god. A lot of people know it as. And the funny thing, the reason why I bring this up and why it ties in is because he was a necromancer. And Joseph Smith, as a young child, he got really sick. He got typhoid, and it ended up settling in his leg. And he almost lost his leg. And his mother was a healer, not only a treasure seeker, but a healer. And she begged them not to cut his leg off. They did not. They cut out the damaged parts of the bone and different things. And he was sick for a very long time and had a limp for the rest of his life. Well, when you're sick and you're a farm boy and you can't go out and do the farm, you're going to stay inside with your mother. She was a known Scottish healer, and you're going to read. And anything he had in that house, I'm sure he read. I really question the fact, and I don't have proof, if he had a copy of the Magus. They say he didn't, but I'm telling you, when I show you these next few things, you're going to wonder as well. And so he's just, regardless, he's reading, he's super smart. He's trying to,
what was that book that you said? The Magus?
The Magus.
By who?
So, this is like old book. Let's see. So the Magus is
it Francis Barrett, 1801?
I think so. Yep. So it is a magical book, and this would make sense if she's a Scottish healer, that she would have this. I can't prove that. Also, you would have a copy of the Bible. Most homes did. And so these things came up later for me. This is something that isn't widely known in the church. I have never seen this before I found this. I mean, I was digging and digging and digging just to figure some things out. And I found this site that had these Smith family magical relics. And they have all these parchments. And some of them are very Enochian. So this is one of them. In nature, this is why I believe, just as Muhammad heard an angel, wrote a book, it became a religion. Joseph Smith heard angels, wrote a book, it became a religion. Scientology, Jack Parsons, Ron Hubbard doing things, heard and saw angels, wrote a book, it becomes a religion. Funny enough, Aleister Crowley also didn't see an angel, but he saw Aiwass and wrote the Book of the Law, which became a big staple for Thelema. So this is not a new concept, but it led me back. This particular parchment led me, well, actually it was the next, it's this one, led me to John Dee, because in the lower corner, that is an angel calling, and it's for a specific angel that I couldn't find anywhere else. And when I was researching it, doing reverse research, it came up John D. And I'm like, well, who's John D? I didn't even know who John D was. I had no clue. And so, of course, what happened to them? They spoke to angels, wrote everything down, and it's the basis for many religions. And so all these things correlate so closely. It's surprising to me.
It's
and
the
none of
basis
this
for all the religions that you're talking about. Essentially, it started there.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And you can't discount it. I mean, you've got Maltese cross, you've got all these sigils, you've got like different, this one breaks it down. You've got different occult symbolism within it. You can't just say this kid didn't know anything. Let's get real. Like, really? Come on. They try to say he was a stupid farm boy that didn't know anything. And they try to say when we learn about the founding of the church, that he found these plates and it was all magical and he dug them up and it was ta-da, like that this angel told him where to go and it was all divine. No, he went on the fall equinox. He was commanded by the angel Moroni to go dressed all in black in the middle of the night on the fall equinox and borrow a black horse to do this and get these from this quote unquote angel in the middle of the night. That doesn't sound very divine to me. Maybe another way divine, but I'm just saying we won't say divine. There's a better like word for that, but it doesn't sound like the right kind of angels if you're going for God, from actual God. And I do believe in angels of other types. Like if you believe, this is where Christians lose me a lot of times. They want to say, "Oh, I don't believe in demons. I don't believe in bad angels. I don't believe in fallen angels. I only believe in good angels and God." And I'm like, as above, so below. Like there is a hierarchy to everything. And not only did King James put together the Bible, he put together 3 books on demons. So why is it so impossible for people to open their mind on what this is and why this is, right? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's like people who believe in the opposite. They'll believe in demons and they'll believe in aliens, they'll believe in everything else, but they won't believe in God or Christ, and that's the slippery slope when it comes to a lot of these things. And as you're going on with these books, I was actually reading an article yesterday where prisons are banning certain esoteric books, and it's the article is called "Censoring Imagination: Why Prisons Ban Fantasy and Science Fiction." And I think I might have seen Utah, but it would make a lot of sense if Utah banned a whole bunch of occult books. So Louisiana, they banned Invisibility, Mastering the Art of Vanishing and Magic, and Occult Primer. Practical Mental Magic in Connecticut was banned. You have the Clavis or Key of the Magic of Solomon in Arizona was banned. Maskim Hole, Babylonian Magic in California was banned. So they're banning all of these weird esoteric and occult books almost. And again, they give you some BS answer as to why they are censoring this thing. But it's almost like as if they believe that these people's minds can sort of make a sort of change somewhere. Because when you're in prison, how you're saying you're a farm boy, you're worshiping Abraxas or whatever, and you coincidentally mess your leg up, so you're crippled too, like Abraxas is, like this, right? What's the Auriga or Aruga, whatever that one weird this is other guy in history that has the weird legs too. I forgot the name, but you're inside and you're just going to read. Like if I was incarcerated, knock on wood, hopefully not, if I was ever put in, I'd come out a Manly P. Hall to the 5th degree. I'd be levitating because I'd just take everything in because you have no time to do anything else. So
absolutely.
And this reminds me
Damien Eccles speaks of this. He said that, he was doing all kinds of things like that in prison. And I think they're probably fearful that he worked some magic and got out that way. Probably. I'm not discounting that, because you know what? If you believe in a miracle, then you have to believe in miracles the other way too. Like really,
I've seen miracles. Like I've seen them happen in front of me while I was in the church. And again, the Pentecostals, they run around the real show-offy when it comes to the Holy Spirit being in the house. So you know how it is. And again, even if it is a show, you still feel something in the air. So there's something to it. And this whole thing of him being home and having access to maybe occult literature is is almost identical to H.P. Lovecraft, and how his grandpa
Yes.
had this whole library, and they were wealthy, and he was probably reading a lot of these different books, the Picatrix being one of them, and who knows, probably this same book that he was looking at, and he was able to craft up essentially another religion, an underground one that people still use today, right? The Lovecraftian aspect, the mythos, to worship those deities. I mean, that's the whole thing with
Absolutely.
chaos magicians and who else is the one that
Well,
uses it? Yeah.
And if he believed in only even if you want to split it into three, the Father, Son, the Holy Ghost separately, then why is he calling down? These sigils are calling down protection and different things from specific angels. Why are you doing that if you believe that God is all powerful, right? It doesn't make any sense. And the church tries to shove these off. Like they're like, oh no, this isn't ours. This isn't Joseph Smith's. This was his brother's. His brother and him, by the way, his brother's name was Hiram. And they were known Freemasons. You know, Joseph Smith was a master Mason. His brother was a master Mason. His father was a Mason. So, I mean, it's not like he didn't know magical things, right? They're taught things at different levels. And I'll tell you, his Freemasonry came quickly. He got his initiation and the next day was granted to be the Master Mason level. And that doesn't happen in one day. And I took this picture too, just so people could see this is like Smith family relics. It really is like
My buddy,
like a thing.
My buddy SB calls Mormonism Freemasonry for the whole family. So
It's so
really
true
funny.
because I think that may have been very well what got him killed, because he allowed women to do it and it just wasn't done. That wasn't, I mean, the whole thing is really patriarchal, and I can't imagine they were very happy about that. You know, his wife played an integral role in that.
Yeah. So he's in contact with this. All right. So recap, he is spoken to. He's in contact with this entity, and it just so happens to be that these lost golden tablets are buried in his backyard. So he goes, he finds them, he translates them. Then is that where he got his doctrines of Mormonism, from those tablets?
Yes. So he translates them, but the Mormon Church will have you believe that he translates them by divine intervention, just reading them, and a Urim and Thummim, which is a breastplate, and it's very much into Freemason. Freemasons have almost exactly the same thing. However, actually what it was is this stone right here, the brown stone that is displayed, is his seer stone. He used that stone and put his head into a hat just like this, and you know, making all the light gone. And then he would tell his scribe, who was blocked off on another side, see, they have it like that, they're side by side. That's not how it is. There was a curtain or something blocking them, and he would tell these certain symbols, and then Joseph would go back and translate it later into words, which is very much almost exactly the same as John Dee, other than it was flipped because Edward Kelly was the one, you know, actually doing the seeing. And so, I mean, it's so similar. And he didn't only see the one angel. By the end, he said he saw 23 apparitions or dead people, and they, you know, required of him things. And the funny thing is all this other stuff, this dark stuff that I'm telling you, the reason why they couldn't destroy it is these family relics are not owned by a church. They're owned by a private collector, number one. So they can't get rid of them. And number two is, even if you throw it all out, even when he died, what did he die with on his body? He died with this, which was he wore a Jupiter talisman, and he never took it off. His wife actually, sorry about that. His wife actually said that it was his and identified it because she wanted it back. And so they can't discount it. They can't get rid of that either. And so there's some things that I'm just like, you absolutely know, sorry, it kicked me out, that there's certain things that are there that you can't get rid of. And so some of it is these parchments, some of it is, the book of his mom's. Like I said, the next prophet attempted to get rid of it and could not. So it's very interesting. If he doesn't believe in any of this and he only believes in divine revelation, then what's he doing with the Jupiter talisman on, and why did he think it was so important?
Who was his scribe during these sessions?
So he had multiple. He had Martin Harris. He had his cousin, which was I forget his name at the moment. And his wife actually helped at the very first half. Emma was his wife, and then Oliver Cowdery. And so they all helped, and I believe he had even one more that may have helped a little bit, but all of them at some point got excommunicated, which is hilarious because we'll get into why. But yeah, it's interesting things. The Smith family also had ceremonial magic daggers, and that had the Mars symbol located on it. He did have another seer stone, although the brown one was his favorite. He also had this sandy colored one. There's a close up of that Mars insignia as well. And so, I mean, the reason why we know the things we know about this is because Joseph Smith wasn't good at treasure hunting. Neither was his family. And so they got taken to court. And when they got taken to court, their neighbors and all, this is the last of the parchments, which I find interesting. So the neighbors wrote affidavits. These are not just so-and-so told me and somebody wrote it down. This was in a court of law. These were affidavits about what had been done and what had been said and why it had been said and how. So these are well-documented things that the church will hide. It's also well-documented that the angel told him, you have to come back, because the plates weren't just easily obtained. He had to go back for years. I think it was 4 years. And he had to keep going back and see if the angel would give it to him or not. And actually, there is a true story. One of the times he went to go get him, a frog, not a salamander, made it so that he could not take the plates. This is actually true, which if you know occult symbolism, a frog is much more indicative of dark magic than a salamander, which is more indicative of light magic. So it's interesting to me that everybody will say, oh, the salamander. Yeah, it's know.
A talking
that's
frog,
the salamander.
though, right? It was a talking frog?
Yes, it was. Yes, and it punched him and knocked him out. And so it did. It was the story that Mark Hoffman told. But the funny thing is then people now say, oh, that's not true. I heard about that. That's the salamander letters. I'm like, wait a minute. It is true. It just wasn't the details that he gave. And so I almost wonder if it was controlled disclosure, because it's very similar. I almost wonder if they knew that it was going to start getting weird to get that information out, and Hoffman might have had a part in that and trade for money. Or
what do you mean by that disclosure? So you're saying that the frog story is actually
it's true. The frog story is written and has an affidavit on it in court by a neighbor that said this. So Mark Hoffman changed it to a salamander, but these things really were actually discussed, and now the church can throw it all out because they can say, oh, that was a forgery. Well, okay, the document was. Yeah, the document was a forgery, but the story wasn't. And so now it's easy to say, oh, well, you heard about that. That's a lie. That's just a lie. And it's so easy for them to just discount now. And so that's interesting. Also, when he went to go get the plates multiple times with the whole frog thing, one of the times they said, you have to bring your brother. Well, funny thing is his brother died in between the time he was supposed to go back and the time he was supposed to get the plates. And so it's very odd. The father took out a newspaper ad, this is real, and said, kind of pre-gaming, like, hey, it was getting close to the date he had to go back. Hey, we would never ever dig up our son Alvin. And anyone that says we would is crazy. And we didn't dig him up. And it was the strangest article. I'm like, what? Why would he put that in the newspaper? And they're like, oh, because people heard about the angel story and they knew he was dead. So they didn't want that getting out that, oh, maybe they were necromancy and trying to get bones or something. I'm like, yeah, but why would you put it in the newspaper if it never happened? You can see that a grave's been disturbed or not. And so finally, I guess they did dig him up to make sure he hadn't been dug up and then reburied him. And I'm telling you, that sounds like they dug him up for a purpose and pre-gamed it with the newspaper clipping, like just in case somebody saw us digging outside last night.
What a bizarre.
We weren't. Yeah.
And this
so
is the
bizarre.
thing. It's such a bizarre thing, but yet you have people who, because I heard about the talking salamander. I've never heard of it being a frog, but that's the funny part about it, is a freaking talking salamander, right? And
Yep.
if that is occulting something else, like maybe it was how you're saying this whole forgery thing, he changed it because Mark Hoffman was so good at what he did. He would have kept going, and the only reason that he got caught was because he got greedy and wanted to like double up on a certain project or whatever it was. But if he would have just chilled out, he would have kept going, because he was extracting the ink.
He was very good.
He was good.
Mm-hmm. And he would actually like expose it to certain elements to make it age and different things that they did back then. But also with Mark Hoffman, did you find out what happened to him? And this is why I think it was set up. And I think at first when he got caught, he was very much spilling his guts. But at some point he stopped talking and stopped giving interviews, which led to another great book that came out later, because there was somebody in there trying to get him to speak, and they said, oh, I'll talk about Mormonism. And it was a big murder case that had happened, the Lafferty brothers. And so that's how we found out about that, Under the Banner of Heaven. It's a whole show. I really recommend it to everyone on Hulu. But anyways, Mark Hoffman at some point completely shut down. Well, guess what? Later, they found him trying to commit suicide, or so they say, and he lived. But the one thing that happened to him, and he was down for 13 hours. Okay, that's at least one shift change, if not two, of guards. He's in there alone. He's in solitary. You would notice if somebody was laying on a floor for that long. I'm sorry, you would notice. And he wasn't helped until that long. And by the time they did help him, the only thing that got damaged on him was his right arm, and he was right-handed. They made it. He was supposedly laying on his right hand. Yeah. So, and it has permanent neurological damage. And so I'm sorry, like that just sounds so sketchy, you know?
Yeah. Like they did it to him on purpose, sort of thing to.
Mm-hmm. Yep. To shut him up, because maybe he really was involved in a bigger scheme. Like, of course, we all see, what's in the paper, what was said, what was in the news, but I always look at it with other eyes, because I'm like, okay, why did he stop talking? Why did he stop giving interviews? He had kids. He had a family. I'm sure there were things, if he was involved in it on okay, this story's going to come out about this frog and it sounds really crazy. Can you make one up about a salamander instead? Oh, sure. We'll give you this, but I'm a conspiracy theorist, so that's just me. But I find it very interesting, for sure, that he was only damaged on his right arm. That doesn't seem normal to me.
Yeah, and so, this Mark Hoffman guy has such a crazy story as well, like his whole thing. And I forgot what book it was. I have to go back and see what
the salamander stories, I believe.
That's what it's called, the Salamander Stories.
Let me make sure. Story or Tell. I have that book. Let's see.
The Story of Mormon Forgery.
It's really good. Salamander Letters. I read the Salamander Letters, and that's a really good one as well.
I have to look at
and it's very in depth. Yeah, it's really good. And I did an episode on this too. So if anybody wants to go check it out, but it doesn't go deep, but it gives you the basics. So, but yeah, so here we go into even more fun. Joseph Smith also wanted us to wear magical underwear.
Nice.
This is like the big jokes for Mormons, right? That we wear magical underwear. This kind of came out with Mitt Romney, I think. So
what was his
for
whole
years,
thing? He was a Mormon?
He's a Mormon. He is. And so this
Mitt
kind
Romney?
of came out. Mitt Romney is.
Really?
And so his magical underwear scandal came out. This is what they look like now. I
Nice.
never knew for all the years I wore them that this was a compass and square. I had zero idea. And so I just thought they were darts, like for your chest, the darts on sewing. I had no idea. They don't tell you any of this. So I wore these for years and years. You have to wear them at all times. They are your underwear. You cannot wear your bra underneath them. It goes over the top. And you are not supposed to be without them unless you're at the gym, swimming, or making more Mormons. And so yeah,
you wear this all the
always.
time.
Yep, always. These are your underwear, and you are not to be without them unless you are making more Mormons, going to the gym, or swimming, pretty much.
What in the world?
And so, yep, you have to be very modest because you can see how long they are, including the shirt, and they're up high on the chest as well as the knee. And I did this for years on years on years, not even knowing that they were anything to do with Freemasonry. They do not discuss any of this with you. Then, let's see, you also go to the temple and you wear certain temple attire. So this is what we wear in the temple. This is real. This is a real photo. A while ago, a couple years ago, somebody snuck in with those Google light glasses.
Yeah, I saw that video.
And filmed the whole thing. So this is what we wear. Very, very OTO resemblance. One nipple is exposed on the robe. You can see it over this man's shoulder right here, but they wear clothes underneath, of course. We have also an apron. We get a new name. We get new underwear. All the things Freemasons do. We also do. And so we get handshakes. People get mad because these are their signs, seals, and tokens that they don't want me to show. So was that last photo.
That's Freemasonic.
These actually, yes, but these are also ours, except we only have 4 of the 6. So for example, the sure sign of the lion's paw, I think that one's on here. The real grip of the lion's paw. There it is. That for us is called the true sign of the nail. So he just changed for Jesus on the cross, right? And so we don't call them the same names, of course not. But we have to know these handshakes. Like I said, we only have 4. Not there's more of this. Is just some of them. I think we only have 4. But you have to go through a fake veil of like God going through the veil of to heaven. And you have to know these to get past the angels and sentinels. So you have to know these handshakes or you won't go to heaven. So just so you know.
Because they're an ethereal being is going to make sure that you can shake their hand a certain type of way.
Yes.
All right.
Yep. And that's how we decide if angels are evil or not. So see, if I zoom in on this handshake, it kind of talks about it. See here. This token has a name. This is the things that they say at the veil. See how there's a curtain there? And they stick their hand through the little hole.
Yeah.
And then you do these little signs and stuff. The top one that was, Freemasonic looking with or OTO with the neck slitting. They had to stop that one because people got really mad and were like, we don't know if we want to do this weirdo-ness anymore. So we don't want to slit our throats or spill our bowels. So they took that one out, I believe, in 1985. I'm pretty sure. It was in the 80s that they took that sign out. But remember, these are supposed to be divine from God.
Yeah.
And so I don't know why they're taking anything out, right?
And these came from the translations that Joseph had done and that the angels had given to him. So all this stuff that you're explaining to us came from the angels.
Well, funny enough, yes, he says this, that they're in the plates. But funny enough, Joseph Smith went through and took out his Freemasonic ceremony And 6 weeks later, he introduced this ceremony. And it's almost identical. I've been told by many people that it's very similar to the Freemason. I am not a Freemason, so I'm not 100%. But from what I've studied and talked to people about, this is very similar to the Freemason ceremonies. So our temples are also covered in Freemason signs. This is the Salt Lake Temple in Utah. There's sun signs, cloud signs. There's all these different celestial type things, like with astrology. And actually, the temple has a full underneath. Let's see if I can find that. Right here, astrology. This is the layout of. This is from a really old book that was like taken off shelves that I found. That's why it's kind of crappy looking on the picture. But anyway, all the phases of the moon. They're very into astrology, stuff like that. But they say we're not supposed to do it, right? We're not supposed to be involved in any of that. But for some reason, their temples are built like this. For some reason, they have all those signs and stuff on there. I mean, I never even noticed when I was in. I didn't even think.
I mean, like, you're not going to, because you're having this pushed upon you. How you're saying you have a strict schedule. You're just going to stay in it, and you're going to keep going down this rabbit hole. You're essentially a machine. You're wearing these magical underwear.
Yes. When I sent those to the guys from Cult of Conspiracy, they were laughing so bad. They're like, "We can't even believe you wore these. That's hilarious." I'm like, crazy. Yeah, I know. So we get an apron, and the apron worn by the temple members is green now, but it used to look like this. It was a Masonic apron. This is actually a copy of Joseph Smith's Masonic apron. My great grandma said, you don't get the nice ones. Back in my day, they were way better. They look way cooler. And I was like, oh, that's lovely. But when we get this apron in the temple ceremony, who gives it to us but Satan? So we're in there waiting, and there's this part where Adam's crying out for help, and he's crying out to the God of this world. And who answers him? Satan, Lucifer. And he says, you should take this apron and cover your nakedness. And then we all stand, and they say, please put your aprons on. And so we do that. Well, I don't anymore.
Wait. So there's a pseudo, what do they call them? Pantomime? Is that what they call them when you're doing like the play?
We have a 2-hour ceremony that we do. The first time you go through is for yourself, and you are doing all these signs and seals and all this stuff for you. After that, you are doing it in proxy for dead people. So this is where the necromancy stays quite alive. And you are going through the temple for a name. You get to the temple and they give you a name, and it's like, say, John Smith, and John Smith died clear back in the 1900s, and he didn't go through the temple. And so you are going to do it in his name. They also baptize our children in his name in a big, huge font. I should have put that photo in here, with 12 oxen in a gold bowl. It's very strange looking. We can look that up, but they get baptized the first time at 8 years old. And then after that, at 12 to 16, they can go in and be baptized for the dead. So they do the baptisms for the dead. We do the other things for the dead, and everything that the church does. The reason why they're very interested in genealogy or names or tracing things back or ancestry.com all has to do with this temple ceremony and doing these names for the dead. And they actually got in big trouble because they started doing them for like Hitler and the Jews that died for what they believed in. And when they started doing the Jews, people got real ticked off, and the Jewish lawyers sued the church and told them, you probably better stop that now. So it gets really weird, just really strange.
So we have this Satan character that
Satan's
comes out.
Apron. Yes, he comes out. It used to be acted live, and now it's a movie. But he would come out and say these things like you have to cover up, and then you do it as well. You stand, you put on the apron, you're led in each part of the ceremony. And so you do what they do. The first part is initiatory, which sucked the worst, but my poor great grandma, it sucked way worse for her because you get naked. Well, they've changed it. You get naked and you get this poncho and it's slit up the sides, literally like a over your head poncho. And you put that on and you go get on this cold slab and you're waiting for someone to come and bless your loins and bless your posterity and your sinews. Also, they use that very word. And it's not sexual in nature, but they touch underneath. Well, people started complaining about that. So they changed that now too. And they wear some sort of suit. When I went, you had to get naked. When my great grandma went, they had to scrub you in a tub. And so it was,
it always gets sexual when it comes to these cults where it's like, at one point in time, the leader can do whatever he wants and everybody else has to just sit back and they have to practice celibacy or whatever it is. And that's just so
it always
bizarre.
gets weird. And so the polygamy, in each one of these, so this is again one of the signs and that they're doing, see their hand and then raising the other one to the square, which is very Masonic. And then so they're doing all these different parts and these symbols and the signs, and they get through and you get to the part where you're going to go to heaven, to the veil. And this becomes important because for women, you go through after your husband gets his new name. And so my ex-husband's name, say it was Larry, and he got Abraham or something. And so he tells his to God. Fake God is behind the veil. And they're like, okay, tell me your new name. And then he tells them, but no one else ever on the earth can know this name. No one, not even me. And so he tells them the name. And then he goes through, and then I get to go through only when my husband says, give me the name, your name. So he gets to know my name, and God does not call me through. My husband does, because I am receiving the priesthood via proxy through my husband. And they used to say that you couldn't go to the highest heaven if you didn't get married, but they change everything. They try and make it super better, And so this also is an interesting this could be a whole episode on its own. I just wanted to throw this in as the last one, and then we can talk way more in depth about these photos. But this is also something that proves Joseph Smith was such a snake oil salesman that it's hilarious. But I really do believe he saw like a demonic angel. I'm not like in the group where he just made it all up. I think he had a lot of influences by books he read and different things, but I do think he saw something the same as John Dee. But these salesmen used to come through with old Egyptian things. And he bought 2 mummies and he bought all these parchments. And he said that they were the lost books. I'm going to do an episode on this. It's so good. The lost books of Reformed Egyptian, which is what he said his writings were. He didn't even know what he was writing. It was actually Enochian.
It was Reformed.
Yeah, it's the same. And so he says it's Reformed Egyptian. Well, come to find out later, now people can decipher these, right? And it's just somebody's funeral, like pamphlet type thing. Like it was some person that died. It was like their death scroll. And so I thought that was hilarious. And the Book of Abraham still gets spoke about like, oh, well, it got misconstrued. They have an answer for everything. I'm going to stop the sharing on this because that's all I have for slides, because I figured by the time we talk about all this, it's going to be a minute.
Yeah, so I did remember hearing about the Reformed Egyptian, and here I'll remove it so you can. And
so funny.
I think what really saves the major religions of today is that yes, we have old texts and all that, but it was so long ago that people aren't gonna fact check it. Like this guy, like we have actual pictures of L. Ron Hubbard, like actual photographs of him. Now, if you really look at like the Nag Hammadi or the Dead Sea Scrolls, like that goes against the main that was unfiltered literature. Like that was not going through the church. That was I like to call it fan fiction. That was what they were, but who knows, that maybe that was the truth. And that's what really did it for me with like the Book of Enoch and the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi, where when I would ask people in the church, they're like, yeah, don't look at any of that stuff. Well, why not? And the reason for that being is that it's going to shatter your entire paradigm, and it's going to pull you out of that. And for some people, it's not religious
that it's
psychosis.
Almost like a dream. Like it's like
what was that point for you, Heidi? What was the piece of information where it really pushed you to like pull you out of it or at least start to wake you up? How'd that process go for you?
So my mom got out. My mom never went through the temple, and she got out and got into a non-denominational Christian church. And people are so cruel with that here. Like my grandma would say things like, oh, are you going to your rock and roll Jesus church this week? And blah, 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 all this stuff. And I'm like, man, you're being kind of mean, like it's a lot. And so people always think of Mormons like, oh, they're so nice. Well, that depends. It depends on what you're coming at them with. Right. So my mom got out and she would feed me little seeds. And that's why I tell people like, never discount the seed you plant because mine took absolutely years. I mean, and I would listen to her, but I would kind of be like, okay, Mom, I know my truth. I know what's true. You're just lost. Oh, poor you. And so she got out and kept trying. And then the church didn't figure on the internet happening. And they came out with this huge campaign when the internet came out. Like, don't look up things on the internet. Doubt your doubts. Don't doubt your faith. That was the actual slogan, one of them. And so if you want to learn more, go to lds.org, blah, 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 go talk to your bishop, go find out this information other places. And then I would start putting things together and asking questions like, well, if the temple ceremony is divine and it was given to us and it's this important, why are they changing it? Like to make people happy? Like, that really shouldn't happen, if it's divine in nature, and we believe that the prophet of the church receives divine revelation from God to him. It's not dead revelation. It's not like the Pope. We believe that he still like literally talks to our prophet. And so I'm like, well, how come he was wrong then? Because in the Bible, it says, if you're wrong once as a prophet, you throw everything out. And then they'll turn it around on you. If you ask a simple question like that, they'll say, oh, well, he's just a man, Heidi. I mean, I'm like, wait, I thought he was the prophet. And like, this stuff comes from God. Either it comes from God or what then? Because you're trying to make it sound like it's okay either way. Like, oh, if he was wrong, he's just a man. Oh, but he's a God. Oh, but he's, and it goes like that. And then, so you're kind of confused. I started getting confused and I was like, this is really wild. So then my ex-husband we were married for time and all eternity in the temple. And to your homunculus stuff, and we'll get into this better later, they're very into mirrors in the temple. They like forever mirrors. So when you get married in the temple, you lean over an altar, you kneel over the altar and hold each other, and you look into the mirrors facing each other, like witchcrafty mirrors, where you can see the tunnel that goes on forever. And you can see yourself forever. And you look into that abyss and say, like, oh, this is how long we'll be together forever.
It's kind of romantic,
forever.
Though, Heidi. I mean,
I don't know. Not with that one. I'm divorced, bro.
Maybe
I was like, oh no.
Maybe indifferent. Maybe there was a smudge or something on the mirror. Who knows, right?
Right. Well, and they use this because when you asked, how do so many people fall for it? If you had a son die or you had your husband die, they'll say to you, don't you want to be with your family when you die? You won't be with your family when you die if you don't make it to the top kingdom, because there's 3, and you can only make it to the top kingdom if you go through the temple and do all the weird Freemason stuff. So all of this goes into that, and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to not have my kids with me. So we went through that, and we were married for time and all eternity. Well, Mr. Time and all eternity didn't get the concept of we're not doing polygamy anymore. So he's with another girl. he's doing drugs. He has when I was 17, he was 25. He did tell me I have super bad bipolar disorder. I'm not quite right. And all these things. And I'm like, oh, it's fine. Right. You take your pill. Like, it's fine. Cause remember, I grew up in this chaos. So I was kind of like, yeah, okay. You'll be fine. Well, he wasn't fine and it didn't go well. And so, he's a recovering drug addict, recovering alcoholic. He has this huge slip and then he gets the girlfriend and we try and work it out, but like, it's not going to happen. So he keeps going back to her. Funny enough, she was a polygamist. She was already married. They're not.
I've seen the Sister Wives show. Isn't that from Utah?
Yes. Yep.
Yikes.
And so we lived in southern Utah, where they originally lived when they first started filming that. And so I was like, no. And they're not supposed to cheat. The men can do what they want, but the women can't. And so, they're not supposed to do that either. And so anyway, long story short, I knew that if I wanted to get a divorce from him, I had to get remarried in the temple. He can marry as many women in the temple as he wants because of polygamy. Even though they ended polygamy on paper, spiritual polygamy is still there, because if you get a divorce, you don't have to get a temple divorce. You can be married to 9 different women in the temple. It doesn't even matter. And so I can't do that. I'm a woman. I can only have one. So when I got with my second husband, I was like, we were going to go through the temple together. We're learning. And he says to the guy, when do we get our son sealed to us? That's what you do with children that are already born. And, if you get married and you have babies, you don't have to do this because you're married in the temple. It just happens. They call it under the covenant. But if you have a kid before, you have to get them sealed to you. And so the guy looks at my husband and he looks really worried at this point. And he says, well, we don't have to do that. And we both looked at him and I said, why? And he's like, well, technically he's already sealed to her because she had kids born under the covenant. She's already gone through. He goes, wait a minute. Who's the dad in this covenant then? And he's like, well, don't worry, because you're going to take his place. And as soon as you go through with her, it'll all be fixed. And he's like, are you telling me that the guy that ran out and doesn't take care of the other 2 kids I'm raising is my son's fake dad in heaven? If you want to see a redhead go crazy, like, it was bad. He turned purple. Like, he was so pissed. And he's like, you guys
because
can
he
leave. And
he believed that.
I was upset.
He was still in it.
Yep.
100%.
He was going through. He was going to go through with me until he heard this. And then he's like, no, I'm not doing it. I know you want me to. This is so crazy. I can't even accept the fact that what they just said, that your ex-husband is my son's fake dad in heaven. And so they kept saying, oh, it'll be transferred like the minute that you get married. And then to get a divorce, I have to go through a whole process because I'm the woman. I have to write a letter to my ex-husband. I have to ask him for a divorce. I have to go in front of a council if he says no. I have to petition for the divorce and ask, like, these reasons I would like to be divorced, blah, blah, blah. And so it's a whole big thing for me, but for him, it's nothing. He just gets to go move on. He could marry 20 more women if he wanted to. And so it was just, that was a crack. Then my mom was a crack. And then I got a divorce from that husband. I got really sick and I almost died of cancer. It was a whole big deal, but I lived, obviously. I had thyroid cancer. He didn't handle it well. We just didn't do well after that. And so we broke up and I met my husband now, and he got out at 16. And I was still kind of like not going to church. I was a Jack Mormon, but I was like, oh, well, maybe we should go back and maybe we should do this. And he's like, no way. You need to read some books. So he starts feeding me this information. He's like slowly feeding me little things like, you need to watch this show. You need to read this.
And how old were you at this point?
You need to look into this. And so I was 34, maybe 33, because maybe the year before. But
yeah.
So, yeah. And so, yeah, right. 33. And so I was like, okay, I'll learn. I'll try. I'll look at it. And he's like, because I'm telling you this, like, I really love you, but I'm not doing that. It's really not a good idea. And it's not what I'm about. And I'm like, okay. So when I started learning, I went to the Heart of the Matter on YouTube. Anybody that's struggling, if you go watch that on YouTube, it's amazing. He used to be an LDS bishop. He tells all about like his problems with the church and what he learned. And it really helped me understand like what I was doing. Like then I watched a Freemason ceremony on YouTube and I went, oh my gosh, like what were we doing? So I quit wearing my temple garments. Chalk that up for like, that's not happening anymore. I was like, what am I conjuring in the middle of the night in my special jammies? Like, I don't even know. And so it really did scare me at first. I was like, this is actually frightening. And the more I learned, the more scared I actually became. And finally, I was able to break free from it altogether, but it came at a cost because my grandma that raised me, that was so close to me, actually reported me to CPS after this. She said I beat my children and that they should all be removed from me. I had to go through court while I was pregnant with my new daughter, almost lost her. She took my oldest daughter and she lived with her for 6 months. And finally, CPS said, okay, kid, you're almost 18. If we take you to court on this and we find out that you're lying, we will perjure you because this case seems not quite right. And she's like, I don't even know what she wrote on that paper. And so my grandma was like, that all got thrown out. So she was ticked that didn't work out for her. So then she sued me in a real court of law for every penny she ever spent on me and my kids, every penny that she ever did for me or gave me or helped me with, or like a broken car. She saved all the receipts for all time and all eternity. That's a joke because Mormonism, that's what they say. So she sued me for like almost $30,000 and she won. And yeah, the judge literally said she's on a fixed income. She has receipts. What do you have? And I was like, I definitely don't have receipts from my grandma when she would buy my kids clothes. Like, that's wild. What? And things that I didn't even want. And he's like, well, it doesn't matter. So he was quite elderly. She passed away before any of that happened, but she did try to take my ex-husband's house. She tried to put a lien against it for that money. Like, all she did was make me and my ex-husband really cool friends. Like, that was it. Because me and him I was like, that is so wrong. I am so sorry, because he'd already paid me out and I was gone and she's going after his house. And that's just wrong. Like, I don't care if he's my ex-husband. He didn't do me wrong. We just separate ways after my cancer.
And this is the Jack
didn't work.
You said the Jack Mormon. Your grandma was a Jack Mormon. So like,
oh no, she was the devout. Oh no, she's not. She was crazy in it. No, my mom was the lukewarm.
Oh, your mom.
This lady was the one that raised me. Mm-hmm. And so she was a missionary for the church, doing like, she was all these things, but she also did like horrible things. And that was another thing that I kept seeing. Like, she's supposed to be this really good missionary to the church, but she steals money from my handicapped cousin, and I know it. And I'm like, so I would say things to her like, or we would go eat on Sundays. I'm like, I thought we're not supposed to do this. Oh, well, God understands. I'm like, he understood everything for her. That's what I know. But I stopped participating in anything like that. As I began to know Christ more, I was like, I'm not going to go eat with you with the money from that guy, from the cousin. Like, I'm not doing that, because I'd say, I don't have the money to go eat today. And she'd say, well, it's on Richard. Ha, ha, ha. And I'm like, yeah, that's not funny. That's just not. And so long story short, she did try to come for me. And my whole family believes I'm a thief. How do you fight it? Like, she died right after that too. It sucks because they all think I'm like this horrible person. And I spent my whole life being devoted to her, like 100%, like 100%. Because she took me in when I was a kid. And I just was shocked, honestly. I lost all my extended family. And especially after they found out I left the church. They're all in the church. They're high up in the church. They'd be pissed about me saying this, like about the temple stuff. Like, they'd be mad. And so I just don't have any extended family. I have my mom. My brother sadly passed away a few years ago. And that we have our own little family. My husband's family is extremely devout LDS. They don't like me.
What is he? Is he? You said he's Christian?
He left at 16. Yeah, he was way smarter than I was. He was like, I'm not doing this. This is
so
weird.
He doesn't have family because they cut him off.
They didn't cut him off. They just treat us weird. We're just the black sheep. They just treat us like he gets grace because he knows not what he does, because he didn't go to the temple. And so he got out at 16. So in their hearts, they still feel that there's hope for him because he doesn't have the full knowledge. I had the full knowledge and I walked away. So I am therefore damned to hell. And they don't want him with me. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if it helps any, it's probably bullshit. So I think you'll be okay.
Exactly. Yes.
But that's how people, right? This manipulation of the mind of people who are maybe perhaps not as strong-willed, or who are on the border of like, hey, I want to leave, but I don't want to lose my entire family. Therefore, I'm going to go ahead and tolerate. It's like you're weighing the pros and cons. Like, well, I guess I'll just stay here. And I mean, that's a lot of, even with abuse, right? Domestic abuse and all, like people like that, they stay in there. It's just manipulation. And yeah, that's rough. And I can't even imagine.
Especially women. Yeah. Especially women that get it, or men. You could be abused in either way. But if you're in a like domestic violence situation, like if you leave and you're the woman, remember you're married to them for time and all eternity. That's a lot different than a divorce, a normal divorce. Like, well, it didn't work and we're going to move on. No, it's your whole everything. Like, this is your everything is at stake here. You know, this is your life. Like, so a lot of people jump into these marriages too, because when they get married, they don't want to have sexual sin. Same as me. I only knew my husband 3 months before I got married. Like, you don't want to have any of that problem. So most people get married like as soon as the Mormon missionary comes back. They leave at 18 to 19 and they come back 2 years later and they get married. It's a huge joke. Like 2 to 3 months, they'll be married. And so that's how it is. And women can go on missions too, but they have to wait till they're older because they are encouraged to get married at a young age. And my grandma was 14. I was 17. All her kids got married between 15 and 18. Like, this is a thing here. Like, it's not uncommon really at all. I mean, one of my kids was older when she got married. And she literally told me, like, I feel like an old maid. And I think she was 24 or 25. Like, she was super young still. I mean, she's like, everybody's having babies and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not normal. Like in real world, you know, but here it is. Here it's, you know, normal.
Did Joseph Smith, because I know he went out, was it guns blazing? Like there was a whole thing with him.
Yes.
Did he have connections to any governmental agencies at all? Is there anything with that?
Well, Joseph Smith ran for president of the United States. Many people do not know this, but he actually did. And he also was pretty high up. So he was trying to make as many Mormons as he could, Masons, and go through and get these temple ceremonies and have Freemason people. Well, they were getting scared in that area because they were worried that he would have a bigger, like, quote unquote, army or group of people than what they would have in the whole state. And so they were starting to watch these things. And then the polygamy thing on top of it, which when I was little, they lied to us and always said Joseph never did polygamy, but he did. And it's proven. I mean, he had over 30 wives and they were spiritual wives, which just means he liked to get caught with girls that he wasn't married to, basically.
I mean, these pictures,
I think that's where
he's a handsome fellow. If these pictures are
the Jupiter talisman is very interesting. It actually is to help people be very charismatic and be very the real picture of him looks more like Jeffrey Epstein, to be honest, which is funny. I know.
Is there a real picture
I'll have
of
to
him?
send it. They did a side by side. Yeah, type in real photo because they finally found one. And I mean, he was very fair and then had, you know, blue eyes, which was kind of unusual.
Oh, man, this dude's hit.
So that one right there with, yep, that's him. Yep, with the.
That's with the filter and then without the filter.
To the right. Yeah, to the right is the real. Yes. And so They did say he was extremely charismatic and charming. And I'm like, well, of course he was. I mean, he did have over 30 wives, but why anybody would want more than one, I don't know. I can't imagine. Women are difficult on their best day. I would not want more than one.
That's what I told my when we were watching the Sister Wives. I'm like, can you imagine having to deal with you 7 or 6 times? Like,
oh my gosh,
that'd be exhausting.
Well, it's so much.
The pros don't
the kids. Yeah.
What is it? The pros don't outweigh the cons. So,
well, and then they say, oh, it's to, fruitfully multiply the earth. Okay. The next prophet down that actually practiced the polygamy, Joseph Smith, supposedly didn't have any kids outside of his marriage, supposedly. And Brigham Young had I think he had 55 wives and maybe 60 kids. That's not multiplying much. That's one apiece. Like you could have done. So in comparison, the polygamy person that I was telling you about, my ex-brother-in-law, he had 3 moms growing up and each one of them had between 10 and 16 kids. Now that's multiplying and replenishing the earth. That's a lot of kids for 3 women. They had almost as many as Brigham Young had with 50 wives, just between 3 of them. But on top of it, they push this ideal so that they believe in a pre-mortal existence. So they believe that we all lived in heaven before we came here. And I had a bunch of spirit babies and they're up there waiting for me to bring them down here. And I'm letting them down. And then later when I die, I get to go be with my husband on our own planet and we get to make a whole bunch of spirit babies to send back down to heaven, from heaven to here, to the people. So it's so strange. Like when you hear all this stuff and they'll lie and say, we never said you get your own planet. Look it up. It's called Kolob. Yes, you did. Like I remember learning about that as a kid and there was a whole cartoon that went with it, but they'll lie. They lie about so much. The racism thing was catastrophic and did not change until 1978. The whole existence of the church and how you get to heaven, remember, is through the priesthood. I get there as a woman through my husband. My husband has the priesthood. They blocked Black people from having the priesthood until 1978, which isn't that long ago. I mean, come on, that's not that long ago. And why did they do that? Because they said that God put that mark upon the Black man, because in the war in heaven, when the angels fell, the Black people that are cursed Black were not sure which side to join. So they just stood and did nothing. And so God cursed their skin with the color of blackness because they didn't do what they were supposed to or whatever. And I'm like, I remember being little and thinking, and my niece is Black and my stepdad's Latino and American Indian. Like we have all these different colors in my particular family, which is kind of unusual in Utah. Like it's a little different, but I'm like, this doesn't make any sense to my mind because you're telling me these people are less than these people. Like I never understood it as a person that really truly loved God. I was like, that can't be right. That can't be true. Like God doesn't do that. Like that means that kid's cursed at birth. Mm-hmm. Like how does that happen? And then there's quotes of them saying if you take the Native American children and buy them up, quote from the second president of the church, Brigham Young, buy up all the Native American children we can so we can make them more white and delightsome. And put them into Mormonism and make them more white and delightsome. It's always talking about being white and delightsome. It's my favorite joke because I'm like, this is so ridiculous. And the only things they changed because they were really pressured, with the whole race card. And I mean, they were one of the last holdouts. It's not like they did it during segregation. 1978. That's 1980, man. That's when I was already born. Mm-hmm. That's wild to me. And so I'm just it just doesn't compute to me that they waited on so many things. And remember, that was divine intervention to the second prophet, that he was a conductor for slavery. He said he thought that slavery was a good idea. He can't remove the curse of the Black man. Only God could. And so he was like, if you ever find your wife in bed with a Black man, better to put a spear through both of them than let them live. All this crazy crap. Okay. But then when you confront people about that in the Mormon church, they'll say, well, that was just times then. I'm like, I don't think everybody wanted to spear Black people. Let's get real. That's crazy, you know? And then on top of it, minus that part, you want to add in that he had divine intervention from God. But wait, he was just a man, Heidi. He was just a man. I'm like, so which one is it? Because I'm confused. Was he just a man, or was he this piece of crap that I'm like, you know, it just, it's a lot. Like you will never get a straight answer from somebody going at them that way. They'll say things like, well, we don't know. And in heaven, it'll be worked out. And it was the times or this or that. It's always an excuse. It's never like, yeah, maybe he was wrong, because if he was wrong, that is the whole crush of the church. He was the second one after Joseph Smith died. He was who took over. And there was a big problem about it because the reorganized church broke off and his son took over the reorganized Mormon church. And Emma Smith, the mother, was devout to Joseph, even though he was dead. And all she said to her sons was, the Mormon church is true, but that polygamy thing, that wasn't a thing. Right, son? And he's like, right, mom. And so they went and made it without polygamy. And then Brigham Young went over here and kept with the polygamy. And so if they go back and throw out Brigham Young, the whole church crumbles because everything's based on him. He was the second one. And so people will say, well, then it should have been his son. Like, you have to go to the reorganized, which they won't do. And then the fundamentalists even break off further. There's so many sects, but the main three are the reorganized church, the mainstream LDS, and the fundamentalists. And even within those groups, they have their own groups. So it can break off and break off and break off. But the fundamentalists, when the church was pressured, they told them, we will not grant you statehood if you continue to disobey the laws of the land and have polygamy. And so the prophet of the church said, okay, we won't practice polygamy anymore. But the fundamentalists were like, then you're a false prophet. So they went and they followed a different prophet. And that's why we have so many different like sects and so many different types of people. Like, you see them and there's no mistaking it. They look like Little House on the Prairie. They live like Amish people. They live off grid. They have their own towns and cities and all these things. And I have that interview out, and he said his childhood was wonderful. Before Warren Jeffs took over, he started lowering the age for marriage. He was doing pedophilia stuff. I mean, it was really bad. Like I said, I think his youngest wife was 12 and she looked like she was 9. She looked like a baby. And so there was no denying it because they found tapes and she got pregnant and it was a whole thing.
Yeah, I think I've seen, isn't there a documentary on this guy, this Warren Jeffs guy? I've seen.
Stay Sweet.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Oh, yeah. And it's really messed up. And I mean, my ex-brother-in-law was telling me, like, before he took over, at least it felt like it was right. You know, I felt like it was a good thing. My dad did it well. My dad lived polygamy well. It wasn't like that. It wasn't with kids. We didn't try and marry kids. You know, that's what happened when somebody takes over that's kind of out there. Now he still runs it from prison. So
wow.
Actually, he's double related to him, because not only is that his mom's, he's related to him on his mom's side, but also Warren Jeff's dad was Rulon, and he married Rulon's granddaughter. So, because they intermarry, because they don't like to bring other people in. They have a lot of problems because of that. But yeah, it's interesting. You could do multiple series on all those things, but I'm just kind of really condensing it.
yeah. No, this is a crash course, and we can always get back together and do this. But let's end it on a good note. What's something that is beneficial, that you found beneficial from Mormonism and being in that sort of faith? Is there anything that you extracted that maybe you still do today?
Well, they are very good with community. I will give them this. Look, most Mormons don't know, like I didn't know, about the Freemason stuff or what they're doing. They're just doing what they're told. Okay. They're not out to do any harm to anyone. They think they're going to go to heaven for this. They're not bad people. Like, my in-laws are not bad people. Like, there's a lot of people that are in this that may have done the things that are weird, but like, that's because like their mom did it, their grandma did it, whatever. They're good people for the most part until you get to the upper echelon, just like anywhere, because absolute power corrupts absolutely. When you get to the top of all of them, it's just crap and bad things. But that middle ground, those people are salt of the earth people. They really are mostly nice people. They don't beat their wives. They don't encourage beating their wives. They don't, like, I've heard all these weird things sometimes when I listen to other podcasts and they're like, oh, we couldn't do this, we couldn't do that because we were Mormon. I'm like, none of that's true. They don't have like, oh, beat your wife class. Okay. It's none of that. They're good people, they just really are. And they're really into community, and they're really into keeping your families together, that, keeping your family unit, a real family unit. They don't love divorce. I mean, it's much like the Catholic. So, they try to be good people. I really do believe in my heart of hearts that they hold on to that so tightly, because if they believe the things I'm telling you, that they're occultish in nature or somewhat demonic in nature with necromancy and abraxas and all these weird things, and everything they love crumbles, everything. And so they're just trying to hold on, really. And they will be the kindest people sometimes. So, I miss a lot of that. I mean, but I know the truth. And so once you know the truth, there's like no going, you can't really go backward. I can't set foot in a Mormon church, and I really don't care what it's for. Like, if one of my nephews or nieces get baptized, I'm going to wait outside and I'll see you in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not about it.
It's like once you learn about the homunculus, there's no turning back.
Yes.
Everything is a homunculus at that point.
The homunculus cabbage babies. I just talked to Matt from Great Deception, and I was like, oh my gosh, do I think there's some weird stuff going on with all that? You better believe it. You better believe it. And I believe they've messed with, my personal opinion, I think they've messed with fallen angel DNA too, as well with that. But that's just me. I don't know.
Yeah, and we can get into that on the
we will another time
on the next one, because that again, there's so many layers, and it's such an interesting story that, and mind you, we're trying to cover an entire cosmology, an entire religion, right? So think about relearning a whole new religion all over again from the very start. There's so many rabbit holes you can go down. And yeah, I'd like to talk about the entities that they would, because I know a lot about John D and Over Kelly, and we can dive down that rabbit hole on the next time.
Definitely
we get
would
together.
love to. Yeah, I didn't want to go too far deep into that, because I'm like, well, if we do that, then it's going to open a whole box of worms. But this at least gives people an idea of how you can get entangled into such a thing and be there half your life, and really devote your life to it. And honestly, like I said, there were many good things that came from that, as far as community and friendship and love and all these things. But also, once you know everything you know, and if you do have a true belief in Christ, I'm not going to stop trying to help people out. Am I going to go up to somebody that I know, like a Mormon missionary, and just try to black pill them? No, that's cruel. Like, I wouldn't do that. These little seeds my mom planted were very careful. They were subtle. They didn't break me as a human being. And I was able to learn at a pace that I could accept it in my mind. And I didn't have to suffer more because of that. It's already hard enough. It really is. So I don't, and if people want to reach out to me, I've made warfare videos, spiritual videos, about the things I've done to help people, because it's hard. And so that's my main thing, is to help people. Like, we don't get paid for this. We don't have any real big reason other than to, I mean, if you're doing this as much as I do it, I'm sure as much as you do it, there's a reason. So, yeah.
Yeah, and with that said, Heidi, where can people find your work? And if they do want to shoot you an email, do you have a website or anything?
Absolutely. I am at the Unfiltered Rise on Instagram. They can send it there. unfilteredrise@gmail.com. I'm wherever podcasts are served. I'm still on YouTube for right now. I've had like 3 warnings. We'll see. We'll see what happens with that. I don't even know. It was stupid warnings. I didn't even, whatever. It is what it is. I don't know. We'll see. They didn't like the divine council. I know that. Yeah. your eyes.
Yeah, we
That's how
gotta
I felt too.
gotta tighten that up. So Unfiltered
Yeah.
Rise
Unfiltered
podcast.
Rise.
You want to plug
Yes,
anything else
yes.
for the people?
Nope, that's everything for me. Just and my Patreon. I do have extra content and early drops on my Patreon as well. So thank you so much for this opportunity and getting to talk with you. This has been fun.
And what's
can't
that
wait till we do.
Patreon? Can you plug the Patreon? So the URL?
It's the Unfiltered Rise podcast as well, Patreon. So yeah, I tried to keep everything uniform so that it would be easy to find.
Yeah. All right. Well,
so hopefully it's easy.
Heidi, this was great. We'll have you back on to dive deeper. I want to talk about, I'll probably read that book and we can talk about Mark Hoffman because that's a really, really interesting story. And yeah, this is great. As always, everyone, make
Sounds great.
to follow the show on social media at the One-on-One Podcast, tjojp.com. Call in 407-476-4606. Patreon.com/the One-on-One Podcast, all that stuff. Anyways, catch you on the other side. Bye-bye now.